Welcome back to Bespoke Addict. I've been asked to show the process of removing the colour and the dye from this pair of Peal Co that I've brought to camera a couple of times in the last week or so. I'm trying to remove old polish and the original colour. It's just not for me. I find it a rather dull colour, but it's a very long and tedious process. I'm just using isopropyl alcohol on pads of cotton wool, and I can't stress enough, this is not a quick process. It's very, very tedious and slow. So just pop these gloves on. It'll probably take, in fact, I'm going to switch the LED off because it's flickering. I'll just stop flickering now. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 hours per shoe. That shoe's had at least an hour to an hour and a half in 3 or 4 different sessions. And there's no great mission to it. It's just a huge amount of patience, and you can't do it all in one go. It just takes too long. And I can see where, let's just pop this one out of the way, because that's not getting touched today. It'll probably be at least a week before I come to even thinking of doing the second shoe. But just a bit of liquid on the pad, so we can see the areas straight away, the darker areas that need immediate treating. And you see it starting to come off on the pads, but it really is a slow process. So I'll go over and do the darker areas first, but as soon as they've got wet, you can't actually tell where the colour's left behind. They'll say we've got rid of a lot of it here, so let's just do these darker areas. Eventually, very eventually, it stops lifting on the pad, and the pad's starting to get dry now. You can feel it gets a bit scratchy. So it's a solvent, alcohol, it does evaporate. You need to keep the pad constantly wet. And yeah, there's still a huge amount of colour around this side. A lot's been removed there. So to me, it's not very exciting to watch. It's very tedious. But I did promise somebody I'd make a video of this, and but there's no great mystery. So I'm just going to go over and do the areas that are darkest when it's dry, and just keep going. And then I'll do the whole shoe, light areas and dark areas, and I'm determined to get 100% of the original dye, the original colour out of these shoes. Then I can completely choose what colour I make them in the future. And I'll be going for quite a pale, similar to the John Lobs, the John Lob that's way too big for me. I've made a lot of work, a lot of videos working on those recently. I'll probably go for that kind of colour, but you really do have to strip and strip and strip. And this pad's getting a little bit congealed now. When in the earlier stages, when it's as heavy as that, I'd have probably changed the pad 3 times in this time. But when there's a lot sitting on the surface, but we're trying to draw it out of out of the sort of texture, trying to draw the pigment to the surface and wipe it onto the pad at this stage. It goes without saying, this is alcohol, so it's not very good for the skin, but neither is it terribly destructive. The skins are already dry because they're ancient. Because they've been covered for years in foul polish, there's no way of getting moisturising cream through that thick layer of polish. They've not been moisturised in decades. So at the very least, even if you choose not to take the colour out, at the very least, you've got to remove all traces of polish to allow a moisturising cream similar to this to go straight onto the skin to be absorbed in. And these skins do desperately need to be moisturised, even without the treatment I'm giving them here. They're already dry. So it's important not to be flexing or bending the skins. They've got very tight fitting trees. And I wouldn't be flexing or bending these even if I wasn't doing this treatment, because they're so old, they definitely need moisturising treatment. But you've got to get all polish off to allow the moisturiser on. And once you know the skins are fully saturated, you can then sort of turn to the final polishing. But let's throw that away and get a fresh one. This is it really. There's nothing else to do, apart from just keep going until these skins turn out like a natural base colour. They'll be like a creamy, undyed, and I'll recolor them. And then the moisturizing cream will feed this skin. It might take 2 to 3 weeks of feeding the skins whilst keeping the trees inserted. Never be tempted to sort of bend the skins when they've been this dehydrated. They were dehydrated when I got them. And now that I'm sort of stripping, they're becoming extremely dehydrated. But it won't do any long-term damage to the skin. It's not good for it, definitely not good for it, but I'll 100% get away with this. There'll be no lasting effects on these shoes. There'll be nothing that will be evident that's showing how heavily they've been stripped. And you can even do this with black. If these were black, with enough patience, you can get black polish out, and 100%, you can remove all of it. It just takes hours and hours and hours. There's no shortcuts, and you can use methylated spirits. It would be possible to use nail varnish remover, acetone, but I'd strongly discourage it. It's utterly brutal. I certainly wouldn't use acetone nail varnish remover on my shoes. It would be a lot quicker, but I just don't think it would be worth the trauma to the skin. If they were covered in grease and the alcohol was refusing to move the grease, or paint, like glossy paint, if the alcohol wasn't moving it, fine. Out of an act of desperation, when all else has failed, acetone is acceptable. If you tried everything else, if the shoes are lost anyway, you've got nothing really to lose by using a product which is basically too harsh on the skins. In all probability, you'll get away with using acetone, but I just would rather not. I've only, in desperate situations, I've done it once or twice and got away with it, but just to sort of speed the situation up a bit, I really don't recommend it. But anyway, we could go on and on. I'm not going to film this anymore because it's now the shoes got sort of dampened. You can't really see where there is or there isn't colour. But of course, you get an idea because it comes onto the pad. And that pad is obviously ready for, let's just throw that away, get another one. But you see what I mean about the amount of time it's taking, what I've been doing here, maybe 10 minutes. And this will take at least another hour, probably split into 20-minute sessions to get this shoe as clean as I want it to be before attempting to recolor it and then nourish it, get the skins back to where they should be, sort of hydration wise, and finally come to polishing, which when you're going for a nice polish, even the polishing takes hours. It's not a quick lick over, but this is a very tedious video, but I have been asked to make it, so I did say that I would, but it's very difficult to get enthusiastic and watching somebody rub with cotton wool. But that's it. No, so I'll continue probably 5 minutes off camera, do plenty more, then I'll allow it to dry. And when it dries, it'll come out all patchy again, like when we first started. And first go to the dark patches when I reapply the alcohol in a few days. But eventually, this will be 100% stripped, and I'll get complete freedom of what colour to go for. And it will be a very pale tan I'll be using.